Us for an all-out discussion on the PBA Governors Cup as well as basketball analyst Juan Banal. Juan B, good morning. Welcome back.
Good morning, Andre. Interesting morning. A lot of things to talk about.
Happy Wednesday. Wala naman pasabog, no, Juan? Wala naman.
Well, I feel bad though because of Korea bowing out
Yeah.
from the qualifiers. I mean, there was a lot of outside talk, right? Like
Yeah.
with Korea's
Yeah.
coming in
Yeah.
well prepared, gunning for Gilas. But it is what it is.
Well, Juan, pag-usapan natin itong Governors Cup. We're at a crucial stretch right now with teams. Dito na nagkakatalo, 'di ba? Maglalaban-laban na 'yan, battling for spots, papasok ng playoffs. And as we take a look, titingnan natin ating team standings heading into today's games. Magnolia, there it is, still unblemished, number 1 with a perfect 6-0 slate. Then sinusundan sila ng Meralco at number 2 with 5-1. Alaska is there, 5-2. Tapos yung NLEX, San Miguel, Phoenix, TNT, Ginebra. And as it stands right now, rain or shine, Terra Firma, Northport, and Blackwater are out of the playoff picture should the playoffs start today. Your thoughts, just by looking at the standings, what are your initial thoughts? Any surprises? Anything you want to note here, Juan?
Well, this is far from over, Andre. The fact that you have your 11 teams that can still make it to the playoffs, because I think the ceiling for losses would be 5 losses. So the ideal standing to even position you to a chance in the playoffs would be 6-5 from what I understand and what I recall. And if you take a look at the 11th team, which is Northport, they have a record of 1-5. So that means if they try winning the rest of the games that they have, that might still get them into the playoffs. Now, of course, it's going to be tricky.
Yeah.
Magnolia, on the other hand, you cannot afford to, more or less, they're kind of safe in the playoffs with 6 wins, but you're just looking at possible ties in the quotient system. But it's still a free-for-all, to be honest, and you've got teams still adjusting with imports and changes that are happening. Players coming out of injury, so anything can still go. It's going to be an interesting next half of the conference.
Gandang actually it's really fun to see and interesting to see sino tataas dyan, sino bababa, sino makakuha ng twice to beat advantage heading into the quarterfinals. Now let's take a look first at the Magnolia Hotshots. Unblemished, as I mentioned, 6-0, walang katalo-talo. Sila na lang ang undefeated team this conference. And yesterday, nakausap ko si Coach Chito Victorero about this run. And he said they still need to work on their defense, which is their calling card. Yan ang signature nila for the longest time. In your eyes, Juan, how have the Pambansang Manok been able to overcome the injuries to their key players, Calvin Abueva, Rome De La Rosa, to stay this perfect in the Governors Cup so far?
I personally think, well, number one, Coach Chito, as humble as he is, he always, would tie the downplay. But I think a perfect record thus far does say that you're doing something really well. But I think the way they're performing started way before the conference began, when they started recruiting different players, and even a couple of additions, like even Adrian Wong being in their lineup. That's the reason why you pick players that fit the system, and it's tough to have players and then try to come up with a system that will suit them. And so that's the case that Magnolia is experiencing now. They had a system, they picked up players that fit the system, so that when somebody is not available, you have other players that can fill in that role and that gap within the system. And that's what Magnolia has been showing so far. You've got guys like Jackson Corpus, that was a big player in his previous team, but when they acquired him in Magnolia, not much playing time. But now that he needs to step up, he fills in that role. Same with Aris Janicio and maybe even Russell Escoto. So these are some guys that are filling in the shoes of the absence of Rome De La Rosa and Calvin Abueva.
Well, nabanggit mo si Adrian Wong. How good of a pickup is this guy for Magnolia? Coach Chito was excited to have him. Sabi niya, nabanggit din niya si assistant coach Johnny Barrientos was also excited. Siya ang tumututok kay Adrian Wong. They wanted to draft him. Di nga lang umabot sa kanila. He was the 5th pick in the 2019 draft. And he was released by Rain or Shine. And then a pickup by Magnolia, a 3-and-D guy. Had 18 points in that game, in their first game against Phoenix. Ito, as we take a look at his numbers, Juan, wag mo na i-downplay, gaano ka solid yung pick-up kay Adrian Wong ng Magnolia?
I'm really not gonna downplay it. Six out of 7 from the 3-point area, and I think that his ability to bring down the ball. He's a tall guard for Magnolia, and the fact that Coach Johnny Abarrientos is working with him, that's going to be a scary threat if you've got a very efficient point guard who can shoot from the outside, can defend the shortest of guards and the quickest of guards from the opposing end, and play hand in hand with the Paul Lee. Come on, that's I mean, Magnolia is known for their defense, but if you've got guys like this, then you can have and you must have to consider even their offense.
Grabe, no? Yun nga, nakita natin yung highlights and I was mentioning to Coach Chito, hinahanap din talaga siya ng mga veterano, nila Baroka, nila Paul, ni Gio Halalon. They were looking for that open three in Adrian Wong.
All of a sudden, their guard lineup got taller, right? I mean, you got Mark Baroka and Gio Halalon. But then now, with Paul Lee and Adrian Wong working side by side, biglang tumangkad eh. Yeah.
Well, Juan, don't go anywhere. We'll take a quick break. Later, we shift our focus naman to the San Miguel Bearmen amid reports of changes in their lineup as they chase a spot in the Governors Cup playoffs. But still have with us today basketball analyst Juan Banal. Juan and I have been talking about the PBA Governors Cup. Kanina dinaanan namin ng Magnolia, #1 team, 6-0 so far. Also performing very well during the last set of games itong Alaska Aces. And I remember last time we spoke, Juan, it was a day, yun nga, kaya tinatanong kita kanina, wala bang pasabog? Yun yung pasabog in-announce at Alaska that they will be leaving the PBA at the end of this conference. That time, 3-2 sila nun. Now they're 5-2. So going back-to-back over the weekend, they're in a perfect position to not just have a playoff spot, but even a twice-to-beat advantage. What do you think of Alaska so far, your assessment?
Well, I think they're just playing with so much legacy behind the back. I mean, the entire week, I've been talking to different people, been talking in different shows also about Alaska. I honestly am a Batang Alaska kid.
Yes.
I grew up with Alaska in the 90s. My dad coached for Alaska. My brother played for Alaska. Just the history behind it. And I think the players know this. And it just adds fuel to their desire to, not go down, not swinging. And you can see the fire in their eyes. Jeron Teng, just the leadership that he's bringing into the lineup. Even that coming off a 20-point deficit against Terra Firma and finishing that game, winning it, you know how inspired these guys are. And I think even if you're not an Alaska fan, you're kind of rooting for Alaska, and that's something that the players and the coaching staff are feeling.
Well, nabanggit mo nga si Jeron Teng getting Player of the Week honors, and why not? Jeron averaging 18.5 points on a 55% shooting clip in Alaska's last 2 games. Motivated tong si Jeron. That includes, of course, his career-high 30 points against Terra Firma. He also averaged 5 rebounds and 2.5 assists. Juan, ano masasabi mo about Jeron as he tries to lead the Aces to a title here? They're 15th in their franchise in their last dance.
And it's during moments of trials and conflicts wherein you really see how the leaders and some people rise up to the challenge, and that's what Jeron Teng is showing us. I mean, he didn't play that well against Rain or Shine, but the leadership is just pushing his teammates. But then bumawi siya ng Terra Firma, 30 points in 30 minutes, and he was quoted saying that he was actually playing inspired, and they're trying to dig deep within themselves to really, exit with leaving Alaska with a good taste and something to remember the brand or the team by, the franchise by. And, just talking to different guys like Jojo Lastimosa, Ali Peak, and you're talking about the different transition phases of Alaska. It's been a long, long journey of Alaska, and now they want to end it at least on a high note. And Jeron Teng knows what it takes, and he's trying to step up.
And let's not forget, he led LaSalle in the UAAP to 2 titles. So, nasa dugo niya yun. Nasa DNA talaga ni Jeron yung pagiging winner. And I remember last week, may soundbite siya na sinasabi niyang gusto niya mag-champion, gusto niya para daw ma-enganyo yung mga buyers daw of the team. He was jokingly saying, gaganahan siya para daw...
And actually, he was quoted saying also, Andre, that he wanted to keep the team together.
Intact,
yes. And for you to say that, intact, diba? That's a big deal to hear if you're the teammate of Jeron. Kasi you'd probably think every man for himself, let's just go through a draft process. But for him to try to keep the team together and say, we love this team, we love what we have, the family that we have, and let's keep it together. And they're trying to prove that by winning as much games as they can, that they are a viable team to purchase altogether.
Meantime, Juan, earlier this week, news naman about a new import for the San Miguel Beermen came out. Ito medyo tricky. I want to talk to you about this. The Beermen are replacing Orlando Johnson with Shabazz Muhammad, who was supposed to be the import for the Meralco Bolts but had to back out before the conference began. San Miguel has yet to address these reports. Ang sinasabi rin sa reports, Juan, ay si Orlando pa rin ang maglalaro mamaya against Phoenix because they have a game. So, medyo confusing. But let's say, sige, palagay natin totoo that San Miguel will change imports again. Do you think this is, this change is necessary for them? Kasi last game, alam ko medyo masama yung nilaro niya nung unang laro niya, ito si Orlando Johnson. But last game, panalo naman ng San Miguel against Ginebra.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. It's a tricky, and we can only assume by an outsider looking in with how these franchises are making their decision. But yes, bumawi si Orlando Johnson in their second game. He didn't play so well, but it was his debut, so you got to give him some leg room to gather and collect himself. And then he did prove himself in the following game in their match against Ginebra. But I think it was also a case of not letting other teams get stronger. I would say, because you're talking about Shabazz Muhammad. This guy is an NBA veteran. He did play for the Minnesota Timberwolves. You'd see him, dunking and shooting from the outside. And then he played a couple of games, around 11 games with the Milwaukee Bucks. And he did try it out in the G League, hoping for a 10-day contract. Didn't get that 10-day contract, so he decided to probably fly here. And so there were rumors that were circulating that he would and should have ended in another team in the PBA. There were also rumors that Aaron Fuller would be replaced after his performance, but then he played so well in the last two games of TNT. Then there's just so much rumors going around, circulating and speculations that can be assumed. But I think it's a case of also not letting the other teams have a really good import. And or it just so happened that Orlando Johnson did play so well in the first game. But let's see. I don't know. Nothing set in stone. We'll see what's gonna happen. But this guy, he's gonna be a threat when talking about Shabazz Muhammad.
Oh yeah, for sure. Sige, since we're at Muhammad now, what can he bring to San Miguel? The dynamic of the system they have there with the pieces they added, Vic Manuel, Simon Enciso, and you still have the old reliables there with Junmar, Chris Ross coming back, Marshall. What can a 29-year-old former NBA player, 6'6", and Shabazz Muhammad offer that Johnson does not?
With all due respect to Orlando Johnson, I think he's kind of taking on the same pair of shoes, Shabazz Muhammad, the same role. Obviously, he's not going to play in the paint. That's why they even made that move of replacing Brown, because he was taking on the shaded area, which is already congested. So they need somebody from the wing that can play, that can be an outside threat. But he is going to dominate in terms of scoring. He's going to be a problem defensively. He's going to give just San Miguel so much looks, and the moment he gets the ball, he's an exciting player. He can sky high, he can run the floor, he can shoot from the three, and he can carry the load when everyone else is not playing so well. So we saw that in the game, but he's also a defensive player, so he can make those stops against the opposing imports of the other team. But we've seen also that some teams that have a guard import are not doing so well so far in the tournament. It's more of the imports that are more power forward and center that are playing well and have positioned their teams better in the standing. So let's see if he can be that kind of player that he can defend outside of the perimeter and defend well in the post players or the opposing imports in the post.
Well, for sure. Kung sino man makakuha, a team will be getting a gem. The former 2013 first round, 14th overall pick in the NBA. Juan, we'll take another quick break, okay? Meanwhile, Barangay Ginebra naman tayo has been struggling lately, so we want to know, how do the Gin Kings get back on the winning track? Well, Juan Banal will take a look at the defending champs campaign when we return. We are having an all-out discussion on the PBA Governors Cup with basketball analyst Juan Banal. Juan, before we continue, though, our discussion, first let's find out the answer to your favorite part of this show, the quiz question of the day. And the question I asked earlier was, San Miguel Beermen last won the PBA Governors Cup title back in 2015. Tagal na, no? 7 years ago. Who was San Miguel's import at that time? Juan. Nalala mo ba?
2015, I think, no, because I remember, because I used to hang out with my uncle, Coach Banal, and I think he was the coach of Barako during that time, and he got a very tall import. But I think this was the year where Doubtnit was also an import, I think, if I
Yeah, I
remember.
think
And
so
if that
also.
was the
Yeah,
year
yeah,
correctly,
yeah.
I think that would be
Para.
Arizona Reed. And
AZ
it is
Reed.
top of mind kasi,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, I would say.
Actually, tama ka.
I don't know, I'm not sure.
No, tama ka. That's the correct answer. Si AZ, Arizona Reed, helped San Miguel complete a sweep of the Alaska Aces that year to win the Governors Cup title back in 2015. So tama ka. Ba, magandang record mo dito Talagang
So far.
so far so good.
Hindi, by memory. Nadali pa recent eh. Pag medyo matagal-tagal yung question doon ako nahirapan.
Sige, papahirapan ka namin sa susunod. Juan, pinag-usapan natin kanina yung Magnolia, daanan natin yung Alaska under final dance dito, tapos yung San Miguel din, a bit of TNT. Ngayon naman, Ginebra. Grabe yung ever since that 3-0 start. Ganda nung simula, downhill na for them. They are now on a 4 games losing skid. Tell us what happened to Ginebra here. Is it simply because wala si Stanley Pringle? Anong nakikita mo, Juan?
I think it's really their defense, I would say. They're giving up in their losses. They've allowed the opponents to shoot 50% from the field. And that's tricky if you're Ginebra. Because if you don't, I mean, Ginebra is known for their fluid offense, right? Just the system that Coach Tim uses. And so they're more known as an offensive team. But if your offense is not there, especially if it's anchored a lot on guys like Stanley Pringle, then your defense has to work, right?
Yeah.
But see, that's the problem. They're allowing their opponents to shoot 50% from the field, at least 50% from the field, and that shouldn't be happening. I mean, I watched the game against TNT, and man, they just let it rain from the outside.
Yeah.
And, I mean, you have to take into account that we're talking about Mikey Williams. He's got a really weird range. He can shoot from all the way outside and just from different angles. But still, you gotta adjust within the game, and I didn't see that happening. And as a player, if you're struggling in offense, you're trying to get your groove back, but then you tend to forget how you're supposed to play defense, and especially as a team. And I think they're suffering from both ends. And something's got to shake up for Ginebra to bounce back. They're really at a losing skid at 0-4. They have to break that or else tutuloy-tuloy yan.
Tama. Baka magtuloy-tuloy. Tapos madelikado pa pag mapunta ka sa baba or matanggal ka sa... Well, I think naman makakapasok sa playoffs itong Ginebra. It's just battling for a spot. Justin Brownlee, nabanggit mo kanina their defense. Do you think they're relying too much on Brownlee on the offensive side to pick up, syempre, a lot of cudgels dahil wala nga itong si Stanley Pringle? What do you think so far with how Brownlee is playing? Because we know what Brownlee can do. He's won titles for Ginebra, but as we take a look at his numbers, solid numbers from Justin Brownlee.
Yep.
Close to 29 points per game, 10 boards, and close to 5 assists. Anong tingin mo, Juan? Are they relying too much on Brownlee here? Anong problema?
I think Justin Brownlee is just being Justin Brownlee, and the numbers that he's putting up are not something that we're not aware of. He does put up these numbers regularly as an import of Ginebra. In last game against San Miguel, he did put up 40 points in that ball game. But then when you start looking at the rest of the team, against San Miguel, Coach Tim only had an 8-man rotation. He only used John Pinto for backup, I think, Prince Capital and even Eli Tenorio. And it was a very tight rotation. And if you're playing against teams that do well from the perimeter, that means they're spreading the floor really well. They're creating mismatches. They're creating collapses on defense. That means your players will have to chase after that scramble defense. They're gonna have to chase after different guys from the outside, way outside. So that means they're exerting more effort. But if you're playing 8 players in a ball game, that's going to bring in some fatigue issues.
Tama.
And then you're struggling offensively, so that's all compounded. So at some point, Ginebra might have to look deeper and really get their other players involved. But you can't question how Coach Tim runs his team.
For sure.
Who would even think of doing that? But I think it's just a matter of just having to break that consistency in losing, and then maybe just ride on that momentum to start working their way up the ladder again.
Juan, Eto, pinag-usapan natin si Brownlee, tapos yun nga, yung mga locals kailangan talaga, yung 8-man rotation na banggit mo. Anong kailangan ng Ginebra to like adjust moving forward? You mentioned their defense, they're giving way too much points. Eto, I don't know if I will be crucified by the Ginebra fans, pero should they consider changing imports? Alam kong institusyon na tong si Brownlee. Alam kong dapat untouchable si Justin Brownlee sa Ginebra, but should that even cross their minds right now at this point after losing 4 straight?
I would give you an honest opinion, Andre.
Go
I
ahead.
think something has got to change, right? You cannot allow. I mean, if it were another team and they are losing 4 straight games, man, you're not even going to think twice to replace your import, right? I
Yeah.
mean, he's the low-hanging fruit, right? But then again, you're talking about Justin Brownlee and his
Yes.
attachment to the brand and
Yes.
the franchise. So that's why people are quite hesitant to say that. But bottom line is something's got to change. I don't know where they're going to start that change from. You cannot also not include the change of import in that conversation because it has to be spoken of. And so I'm not saying that's the solution. I'm not saying that's the only solution, but it has to be talked about
Yeah.
to even consider other imports if you really want to do something and start some change because 0-4 is not a good sign for Ginebra.
Well, Justin Brownlee is just really too good and too nice, and he's won championships in this conference, the Governors Cup for Ginebra. So that's just parang unfathomable. Pero sabi mo nga, some things have to change dahil 4 straight losses. Juan, maraming salamat ulit for joining us today, and we'll talk to you again soon. Thank you, as always, for staying on top of things in the PBA. Maraming salamat. Ingat ka. We just spoke to basketball analyst Juan Banal.